This video might be a little bit long than usual, so grab your coffee, grab your favorite cocktail, maybe your wine, and let's look at some of the flowers that I started from seed in 2021, and let me show you how they did, how they bloom, am I going to be starting them again, all of that good stuff. I am not going to go through every single flower that I started from seed because it will be like a real long video. But I'm just going to show you some of my favorites, some of the ones that maybe didn't do too well, and some of the ones that I might be starting next year as well. If you're new here and this is the first time that you're watching a video of mine, welcome. My name is Roxana and I garden in Zone 5 in Central Indiana. I am mainly a home gardener that, works with flowers, shrubs, a few annuals here and there in containers. In the last couple of years, I started also growing vegetables in my backyard. Since I started a bunch of those vegetables from seed, might as well I started some flowers for my garden, and today I'm going to show you how easy it was for me to start some of these flowers from seed and why I think that some of these might be a repeat for next year, for 2022, and why I think some of them are just not the best for my son, for my taste. And this is just a personal opinion, you guys. This does not mean that the same flowers are not going to do well in your area. This is just things that I noticed that for my garden, for how I like to mix things in my own flower beds, I just don't think that some of them are gonna work out for next year. The main companies that I use this year for buying most of the seeds that I'm going to show you are Baker Creek's, Johnny's, Park Seed. A couple of them were from Eden Brothers, and some other seeds were from the ones that I saved from my own garden from last year, and some from a seed swap that I joined. All of these seeds were started indoors under grow lights, well, under LED lights. They're not really grow lights. I guess you call them grow lights because you use them to grow plants, but they're not really labeled for growing plants. I am going to have a link for a playlist of all of the videos that I make in 2021, from showing you my setup with my shelves, with my grow lights, with the containers that I use, potting mix, fertilizers, all of that. I'm going to leave a link to a playlist where you can find all of these information. But also, if you have any questions regarding any specific flower that I have here, I'm going to try to give you as much information as possible. But if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments below. My average last frost date here in Central Indiana is the end of April, but I play it safe and I give myself a couple of weeks or so of cushion, and I consider the beginning, middle of May, which is when I am able to put all of the plants, all of my vegetables outside, so that I don't have to worry about a frost killing all of them and just making things sad for me. So I am going to start with Dusty Miller. I started two types of Dusty Miller, New Look and Silver Dust. I am going to talk to you about New Look because these are the ones that I think that perform better for me as far as my own garden goes. I started them about 11-ish weeks or so before my last frost date. So 11 weeks, I heard that Dusty Miller takes a little bit of time to, to start going. And yes, they kind of took a little bit of time for me. Maybe it was a little bit too hot. I don't know, maybe in a cooler environment, it would be better for them to start, as far as I have read about Dusty Miller. My room where I store my seeds is really crispy, nice and warm. They did really well. I put them up a couple of times and they went out in a couple of areas of my garden, but the one area in I call it in my retainer wall area of my garden, they did amazing. They actually performed really well. I think maybe that they could have used a little bit more sun. I think that they did really well, and actually I am leaving those there in that bed to see if maybe they come back for me next year. I heard of people in my zone that Dusty Miller comes back for them, and I am excited to see what they do. So hopefully next year, next spring, I can give you an update on Dusty Miller, on New Look, and see how they do for me. Scarlet Sage Salvia was one of my best performers as far as flowers that I started from seed goes. They did amazing. The hummingbirds just love this plant. It was fairly easy to get them going, to get them to germinate, but I definitely think that next year I'm going to start them a little bit later in the year. This year in 2021, I started them in about 10 weeks before my last frost date. And I think that maybe they were ready way before I was ready to take them out. So I think that instead of starting them 10 weeks before next year, I am going to maybe go for 6 weeks. I think that that's definitely plenty of time for them. The way that I'm growing them inside, where my room is really nice and warm, I think that they're going to do better starting them later in the year. My Coleus. I am so upset about my Coleus. This is my second year starting Coleus from seed. I have absolutely no problems starting them from seed. They germinate, they grow beautifully. You saw me how I started them indoors. They got this rich color right away. They did really well indoors for me. The moment that I started taking them outside, they died. Last year I took my Coleus just with everything else, with my tomatoes, with everything else that I had indoors. I started taking them outside little by little, 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, in the shade, no wind, just trying to vapor them a little bit. And they died last year. So this year I took a little bit more extra care for Coleus. While I was taking everything out, for an hour the first few days, I will only give my Coleus 10 minutes and I will bring them inside right away. Still, I think that they have been out for about a week. When I let them be outside for about an hour, that was enough for them to be killed, to be done. They did not like it. So I don't know if it's the variety. I started chocolate covered cherries. They're just a gorgeous pink and dark brown variety. I don't know, maybe I need to start a different variety of Coleus next year, because honestly, I don't know. Do you guys have any tips for me? So we'll see. The seeds were actually very expensive as well. They were about $4 a packet, and each packet had about 10 seeds only. So it's not like I have a bunch of them still there, waiting for me to try them out. But I got the seeds from Johnny's. Again, no problems as far as germination or how to get them going inside. Sweet peas. This is another one that I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to start them next year. I started sweet peas about 7 weeks inside before my last frost date. A couple of things about sweet peas. I honestly, this is the second year that I tried them. I don't think that soaking the seeds in water makes a huge difference as far as germination goes. I tried this myself. I mixed them all. I got 100% germination, regardless if some of them were soaked or not. So I don't think that, at least the seeds that I have gotten personally, I don't think that makes a difference for myself. And two, I used paper pots that I make. I think they were fairly easy to use, and I think that this coming year I'm going to be using them a lot more, because they were a really great, cheap, easy DIY for me to do to start sweet peas. They did great, honestly. Last year I know that I started sweet peas way early. Again, I think because my room is a little bit too warm, the sweet peas just took off, and they were already halfway through, way before I was ready to take them outside. So last year I took them out too early. The frost got them. I don't think they were ready right away for me to take them outside, even though they're supposed to be cool, loving plants. So this year I waited until it was a little bit warmer in the year to take them outside. They did great. I put them in a container where I make this nice trellis for them made of bamboo, and they did okay. I have mixed feelings about them. I really enjoy the plants. I think that when I see them in other people's gardens, I always enjoy their look, how they do for them. But I think that my zone here in central Indiana, it's maybe a little too warm for them. They didn't bloom as much as I wanted them to bloom, and the fragrance that everybody, talks about sweet peas having this lovely fragrance, it wasn't there for me. So I don't know. I might try them again next year. I don't know. I'm still debating. I think that I have a few seeds still there. I don't know. Do you guys in my zone, do you guys grow sweet peas successfully? Let me know please in the comments. Alyssum was another flower that I'm definitely going to be starting from seed. I don't think that I'll ever stop growing them from seed. I started them about 7 weeks before my last frost date, and I used, this year is the first year that I used the 200, the super tiny plugs. I could show you. They are the 280 plug tray that you can find in a lot of commercial places where, you know, they sell specialized items for starting seeds. I found those plugs through KC from the Lawrence Garden Network. I think that's her channel here on YouTube. She has been using those for like the longest time. They're like these tiny plugs, and I really like those. I might actually order a few more trays for myself for next year. But I started those and they did amazing. I put a bunch of that Alyssum in containers and some flower beds, and they did great. And I started them 7 weeks before my last frost day. I use Alyssum in flower beds, I use them in containers, and they did just amazing. And even here towards the last of the season, towards the end of October, beginning of November, they were still, you know, growing and blooming. I probably still have a couple of plants out there that I haven't picked up because, you know, the cold finally got to them, but they were just going and going non-stop. Cannas for me did so well this year. I actually started Cannas from the seeds that I saved from last year. They did amazing. Cannas are the only seeds that I spend a little bit more prep before I start to get them going, before I try to get them to germinate. I soak the seeds about 4 to 5 days before I put them in containers, and before I put them in water, I spend a little bit of time scratching some of the surface of the peel of the seed because they're really hard, and you have to make some sort of cut on them to let the water go, to let the water in. Otherwise, they're just not going to do anything for you. They're just going to be sitting in water. This is the second year that I started them from seed, and I just use a metal nail filer and I just scratch a little bit and I put them in water. And about 4 or 5 days after they had been sitting there in the water, you can start to see a little bit of a tail growing. You know, they start sprouting, and that's when I move them into soil. I know that a lot of people save the tubers or the roots, whatever it is that you call them, from the plants that they grow that year, and they overwinter them just like you would your elephant ear corms or your dahlia tubers. But for me, starting them from seed is just super easy, and it's not that hard, honestly. I had a really great germination from the seeds that I started from last year. So this year I'll probably purchase a bunch of seeds because I really want to have a lot more of them for next year. I also started marigolds from seed this year. I normally use a lot of marigolds for my raised beds because they are supposed to help with controlling pests. But honestly, the marigolds that I started from seed this year, they were these double bloom marigolds that they just look amazing. The plants were a little bit taller than what I'm used to in marigolds, but they had this lovely color. They were not quite white, they were like an off-white creamy color, and those are definitely ones that I'm going to repeat next year because they just look amazing. They perform well. Once they start producing flowers, they just keep on going and going. And I bought the seeds originally from Baker Creek's, and I thought that the seeds that I have growing for my white marigolds were from the ones that I had from a seed swap. But after watching some of the videos where I started them, I realized that the seeds, the actual plants that I had, were from Baker Creek. So I had great germination as well. No, I don't work for Baker Creeks. I just really enjoy their seeds. They are quality seeds where I don't have to worry. I don't have to guess if I had a bad batch of seeds. Sometimes you get what you pay for, unfortunately. And the marigolds, I started them about 7 weeks before my last frost. Another flower that I started about 7 weeks before my last frost date were straw flowers. The straw flowers are new for me, just like a bunch of these flowers, honestly. And I wasn't sure what to expect from them. So they had great germination. I actually started them in these silicone trays that I purchased from Hobby Lobby. I think those are maybe like ice maker containers. I make a bunch of holes at the bottom, and I got different kinds of flowers, that I started from, that I had good germination. It was a nice, experiment to do. I don't think that I'm going to be using those trays next year. I don't know. My favorite star flowers that I started were the ones that I purchased from Floret. They are called Scarlet. Honestly, I wasn't sure how the plants were going to do, because even though they had great germination and they were growing well, the foliage, the leaves just started looking a little bit sad and weird, like they were dying almost. But I just kept giving them water and continued doing what I was doing, just like everything else. And I don't know, some people said that that's how straw flowers look like at the beginning, because once I started taking them outside and once they took off outside, they just started growing and growing. They actually got really, really tall for me. Some of them got up to 4 or 5 feet tall. I was definitely not expecting that. So now I know next year where I'm going to put them. If I put them in containers or in my flower beds, I'll know where to place them, because I can expect them to get that tall. Bunny tails were another flower that I was new to, and honestly they were a little bit of a letdown. I think I had really high expectations for bunny tails. I was expecting, this glorious tall grass with just gorgeous bunny tail blooms. The plants were really, really short. I don't think they even got up to a foot in height, but regardless, they were really, really cute where I put them. I had them in my flower beds, and I also had a bunch of them in one container that I am showing you here, and they did okay. I think that I experienced those. I like them. I don't think that they're going to be a repeat for me for next year, but I'm glad that I tried them. And I think that for smaller spaces where you need something small and unique, bunny tails are the perfect flower. I didn't have any problems with the seeds that I purchased. I had great germinations, and I think that I started those in silicone trays as well. About 7 weeks before taking them outside, that's when I started them, and they did great. It's just not what I was expecting from them. Ornamental mint was one that really surprised me. I started them about 7 weeks before my last frost date, and I started them in the 288 plug trays. I think that I started about 6 or 8 of them. I can't quite remember. I only did a few. I was really I was a little bit worried, because apparently mint, even though this is ornamental mint, mint is known to be invasive. Whatever you put it, you can't never get rid of it. So I knew that I was going to have mint in a container. So I only started a few of those plants, but honestly, I think that I'm going to start a bunch of them next year. And just like Coleus, there were only a handful of seeds in the package, and they were kind of in the upper expensive part of what I normally pay for seeds, but they're really cute. They're really neat. I use them as a ground cover for my coffee cups, elephant ears, and they did amazing in that container. One thing that I noticed is that I really needed to keep up with the watering, otherwise it would just look really, really sad. So that's just something that I have to keep in mind next year, that whenever I have those, I really have to keep up with water them all the time. Nasturtiums were a little bit wild for me this year. I went a little bit crazy, and I started 4 types of nasturtiums this year. I soaked the seeds overnight. I think that really kind of helps with the germination for these ones. Thinking that I was going to thin the ones that I didn't want if they all germinated, but honestly, it had really, really great germination, and I just couldn't find myself to get rid of the extra plants. So I divided them, and I had a bunch of nasturtium plants. I gave a bunch away to my one of my friends, and I gave a bunch of to my mom's, and honestly, they were amazing. I got a few of them in containers and they did really well. I am definitely going to be repeating a couple of them for next year, but I do want to start some that are variegated. So if you have a good variety that you like, I don't care if it's a trailing or bushy variety, please let me know in the comments which one you like so that I can check them out. Hyacinth beans, the ornamental type, they were amazing. They didn't really flower for me that much. I did have a couple of blooms here and there, but it wasn't like you would expect of, you know, of a flowering vine. I started them 6 weeks before my last frost date, and honestly, because they are heat loving plants and because of my room was really warm when I started them, they just took off. Next year, if I started them again, I'm still thinking about it, but next year if I start them again, instead of having 6 weeks for them to grow inside, I think that I'm just going to cut that in half. So because they were ready, they were definitely ready. I think that I had to put them up a couple of times because they were just growing and growing and growing. But I don't have the space. I only have 2 shelving units, and honestly, these things were just growing and growing. There were a couple of times where I spent almost an hour just untangling all the vines because they were next to each other. I think that I had like 12 plants in one area and they were just going crazy against each other. So I used 2 plants for my big containers. For some reason, they didn't do that well there. They just, once they started going, they kind of die off a little and then they just die completely. I don't know what I did wrong there. I don't know if the other plants, because I had tons of plants in those planters, I don't know if they were all fighting for nutrients. I honestly don't know. But the 2 that I had in my obelisk, the one that my husband made, those did amazing. Those just grew and grew and grew. And I think that the reason why they didn't bloom for me that well there is because that flower bed, it was my no-dig flower bed that I had a huge layer of compost. So I think that having all those extra nutrients just pushed the plant to grow a lot of foliage, but it didn't really have enough time to bloom. So that's what I'm thinking. I don't know. But definitely, if you are starting your seeds indoors in somewhere really warm and where your plants are just going to love it, then definitely slow down on the time that you start them indoors. Amaranth was another plant that I was just blown away with because they love my garden. I started Amaranth about 6 weeks before my last frost date, and they were gorgeous. Again, I think that I went with the recommendations from the package saying start them about 6 weeks before your last frost date. But honestly, I think that I'm definitely going to start those next year. So next year, I think that I might just give them 3 to 4 weeks instead of a whole 6 weeks because they were ready way before I was ready for them. I used a lot of the blooms in floral arrangements that I did. I think that I show you a couple of them, but they were just super neat and the plants really took off where I had them. I kept on cutting blooms all the time, and that really just pushed the plant to just keep on blooming and blooming non-stop. And I really want to try a couple of different varieties for Amaranth. So if you have a favorite that you like, the one that I started was Red Spike, but if you have a different type that you like, just please let me know. Lace Flower was started 8 weeks before my last frost date. They were kind of slow to go. I don't think that I have really great germination from them. I purchased the seeds from Floret, and I mean, they did well. Honestly, they did well, but not like everything else on my shelves. I put them next to the Amaranth when I was ready for them to take them outside, and the Amaranth just took over the whole area where I had them. And I think that the lace flowers suffer from, you know, like the expansion of the amaranth. So I am definitely going to try those next year again, and I will have them somewhere where they can just grow and be the plant that they can be, because I think that definitely where I put them, it was a big no-no, because I wasn't honestly sure how they were going to do, and the amaranth just took off entirely over that area. So definitely a yes for next year. And with that, I am done talking about flowers that I started from seed. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. Again, if you have any questions as far as the plants that I mentioned here, just let me know in the comments. I have a bunch of videos about how I started these seeds indoors. I will have links to those videos, to that playlist. And with that, are you guys interested in seeing videos again of how I start seeds for 2022? I just don't want to do a repeat again of last year, even though I'm going to be starting different new plants and probably doing some other, and probably doing things different with the things that I did. You know, it's just a learning experience, just like everything else. You do things, you mess up, and you just try to do better year after year, perfecting your style. But let me know. Thank you for being here, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, maybe today's the day. Happy holidays. Until the next time.